Unforgettable 911 calls that will haunt you forever. Stroke call. An elderly woman in her 70s called us, and with polite insistence in her voice said she thought she was having a stroke. She mentioned that her grandson was with her and asked us to call her daughter to pick up the child. By the time she gave the phone number, her speech had become very slurred. By the time the ambulance arrived, it was probably no more than 5 minutes. I could no longer understand anything she was saying. It was very scary and sad to hear how a person gradually loses consciousness while talking to you on the phone. Domestic violence and tragedy. About 3 years ago, my former neighbor told me a story. A 6-year-old boy called 911 and said his father had put a gun to his mother's head. We could hear the father yelling at his wife and threatening to kill the child in the background. My neighbor told the child to hide. She had to convince him to do it when gunshots were heard in the background. When the police and paramedics arrived, the mother had been fatally wounded. Unfortunately, they couldn't save the child before his father shot him. Family tragedy. 7 or 8 years ago, a man called saying he had returned home and found his adult sister beaten. The suspect had wrapped a phone cord around her neck and tried to push her out of the window. His sister was still alive and able to talk. Her eyes weren't covered, and I was sure I could get a description of the attacker from her. She answered all my questions but categorically refused to give me any information about the suspect. Later, I learned that she did it for self-preservation. The person who hurt her was her brother, who had called 911. He sounded so convincing that I felt uneasy. I also felt terrible for continuing to pressure her while the person who hurt her was nearby. Elderly woman with dementia. A 90-year-old woman thought someone had broken into her property and called the police. However, she had severe dementia and forgot she had called the police. When someone knocked on her door, she thought they were intruders. She pressed the button on her wristband to contact us and then pulled out her gun. I called the police while talking to her, and the recording captured her shooting at the officers who had arrived on the scene. Everyone was shocked, and I tried to convince her not to shoot and immediately called my supervisor. Eventually, we and the police calmed her down and got her to stop shooting. Apparently, she missed the officer by just 10 centimeters. We had to involve her family, and she was soon taken to a nursing home. First overdose. I received a call about an overdose. It was awful to hear someone dying on the other end of the line. The sounds were a mix of gurgling and labored breathing. Fortunately, I was speaking to a friend of the person who overdosed, so I managed to get some information to pass on to the police and rescuers. Unfortunately, the caller was also high and in shock, which is understandable, and he lied about what substances his friend had taken. Because of this, the administration of the antidote was slightly delayed, though not enough to cause fatal consequences. Nevertheless, the victim survived. Death of a son. A woman called asking for an ambulance. She spoke in a completely calm voice without any emotion, as if she were calling the bank to check their hours. I asked for her address, and she calmly told me. Then I asked what happened, and with the same lifeless voice, she replied, "My son is dead." Her tone didn't change at all. It turned out she had caught her 15-year-old son using oxycodone. He vomited, and she didn't know what to do, so she simply sent him to bed in the middle of the night. Either he took more or what he had already taken caused him to vomit again and he choked. Preventing suicide. A woman called saying her father had sent her an SMS saying he intended to commit suicide by jumping under a train. This didn't scare me. Such things happen from time to time. What was frightening was what she said next. In half an hour, a train will pass through our village. She tried hard not to cry during our conversation, but at that moment, she broke down, as if realizing they had less than 30 minutes to find him or he would die. The man was found sitting on a bench at the station, drunk and depressed. Construction tragedy. A friend of mine received a call from a guy who had been crushed by collapsing scaffolding. He kept talking to him until the man died before the ambulance arrived. The operator was a tough guy, a former policeman, but I had never seen him so broken. We only learned about the incident a week later. Saving an abducted girl. My mom works as a 911 operator. Once, a young girl was abducted. The abduction followed the usual script. A friendly woman bought her a drink at a bar, gained her trust, etc. Eventually, she drugged her and handed her over to a man who took her to his basement. At one point, he fell asleep, and the girl managed to find and use a phone to call 911. My mom answered the call and essentially helped save the girl. She told her to look out the basement window and try to spot any street signs or other landmarks outside. Eventually, my mom and several other dispatchers sent police cars to drive around the area with their lights flashing until the girl spotted them. After seeing them, the police were able to pinpoint her exact location. They found her safe and sound. My mom received an award for excellent work. Thank you for watching. In the comments below, share your own bone-chilling or spine-tingling stories where your bad feelings signaled danger. Don't forget to check out our other videos.